Hi, my name is Chuck Everson from Villanova University, and this is the Big East Rewind. And today we got a great show for you, but we can't do that until I talk to my co-host, my buddy, Dr. Sonny Spera. Sonny, how are you?
Chuck, I'm doing great, man. I can't wait for this episode. This is going to be a lot of fun.
You know, I tell you what, we talked about this show and as we were putting this together and what kind of fun we've been having since we started this, right?
Yep.
And we wanted to get the perspective of people that lived through what we were through, not only the players and the coaches, but different types of, we got managers coming up, we've got officials coming up, we've got media people we've spoke to, but I don't know of any show that has mascots coming on to give their perspective. These guys were on the floor with us
in the trenches,
but never had to play a game. So
they might have run more than me, though.
I ran more. Hey, I guarantee you, in your 4 years, I ran more fast breaks than you.
I bet you did.
So, I guarantee I had more anxiety wanting you guys to win.
Joining us today on the program is Dennis Brogan, who is known as the Dome Ranger. And Dennis was involved at the Dome for the Syracuse Orangemen for over 10 years. And I distinctly remember him running lap after lap. I said, this guy's going to drop.
With the hat up. He's running with the hat up.
With the and the blue mask like the Lone Ranger. And also with us is Glenn Beccarelli, who was the original St. John's Redmen back in the early 80s. And Glenn and I know each other for a long time out here on Long Island. And Glenn was nice enough to come on with us today to talk about his experience with St. John's. So, guys, welcome to the program. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's start with you, Dennis. How did you get involved with what you did with Syracuse?
It's a cool story, actually. It was 1980. I was at OCC, Onondaga Community College. I was in a theater school taking theater drama, because I couldn't add, subtract, or multiply. And so and there were a lot of good-looking women there, but I wanted to get into acting. And, we'd lost in 1978 the Saltine Warrior for a lot of good reasons, because of the depiction of Native Americans and so forth in a negative way. I mean, there are probably ways you could do it that are dignified, but so they were searching for something. There's actually a Roman warrior. A good friend of mine, Paul Gunderson, who helped write, over 1,000 poems we did on the radio stations called Dome Poems. We were coming up with an idea. We thought of, at that time there was the San Diego chicken. It was about the only type of mascot type of thing out there, really, other than a horse or a tiger. And so we thought of the carrier pigeon.
That doesn't seem too tough, Dennis, to carry a pigeon.
That would have been a tough one to pull off.
Listen, you can't score here, Sonny. That's what they were going to do.
Paul said, what about the Lone Ranger? What if you become the Dome Ranger? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I was living on a Tisco Lake with some buddies, and Paul's mother dyed a Sears white cowboy clothes outfit orange 3 times, and cowboy boots, a hat, and a mask, and away we went. And excuse me. The first game in the Dome that year was, I believe, Miami of Ohio for football, and we had some issues with fan behavior and flipping the other team off and spilling beer on them on the opposing side, and we thought there needed to be something that came up for sportsmanship, could get people going. So we came up with this idea, and we picked the Rutgers game, and showed up, parked the car, had a blue raincoat on, dressed as the Dome Ranger, walked into gate, I think it was N, maybe gate N, be the southeast corner. Cop by the name of Gene Hawman was a sergeant. You may remember Gene. He was on the security patrol for Dome games. And he said, "Who the hell are you?" I said, "Well, I'm the Dome Ranger. How'd you get in here?" I had a ticket in my hat. I said, "I bought a ticket." He goes, "Oh." He goes, "Tell you what," he says, "you go down the field, I'll have you arrested." I said, "I'm not going on the field." And he pointed down the long concourse. He says, "See the fella down there in the blue sport coat? that's Mr. Benzel. This is his building. Make sure you go introduce yourself to him.
That's right.
Well, I ran down, the thing. Hello, Mr. Benzel, how are you? And he looked at me and he goes, who the hell are you? And he said, how the heck, and I don't believe he used heck, but how the heck did you get in my building? And I said, I bought a ticket. And he said, I'll get you arrested if you're on the, and it began at that moment. I ran around the Carrier Dome and was so excited with adrenaline. The next morning, my father's best friend, Al Bracey, was having breakfast at our house and said to my father, hey, Bill, you wouldn't believe it. My dad goes, how was the game yesterday? Because he knew I did this. And Al goes, oh, it was good. He said, pretty strange, though. They had 4 or 5 cowboys running around. They had some upstairs and downstairs. And I was just running. I did the first level and the second level. I had a pattern. I'd follow the ball. And, over the first 3 years, I didn't identify my name. So I was sort of in secret. We could be down after a game drinking beers at Scratch Daniels or, one of the bars downtown. And I'm dressed as a Dome Ranger. I go home and shower and come back down, and I'm just, dressed to go out. I'm 24, 5, 6, 7 years age, and you wouldn't know me. I'd go up and I go, how you doing? Let me buy you a beer. You wouldn't have known I was there an hour ago. So it's pretty cool. And then, people like Dick Gibney. Do you remember Dick Gibney, Sonny?
I
He
do.
was an athletic director who passed
I sure
away,
do. Yeah.
way too early. And Bill Rapp Sr., Mr.
Yep.
Rapp, the old man. Really, helped me out. And then, all of a sudden, I think Mitch Lewis did an article and his editor wanted my name, and I finally gave him my name, and it worked out to be going on the radio and doing radio and getting into advertising, which is what I do today, and marketing. And, it was a pretty wild 10 years. The neat thing is if you look at SU athletics, in the 80s, there probably wasn't an athletic program of its size that had the success with football, basketball and lacrosse. We had 5 or 6 lacrosse tournament, championships. We went to Final Four. Football, came back. And I got to be part of the whole thing. Eventually Larry Kimball gave me a press pass, so I had a ticket. I dressed in the football home coach's locker room. I had my own locker room, and so I did like that 10 years. And then in 1990, I decided I wanted to, I think at that time I was 33. I'm like, okay, it's time to, get out of this. We had the NCAA investigation then. It was time to, move on to something. That's where this towel comes from. This is Coach Thompson gave me this on my last game. It actually has a signature right here, if you can see it. A little bit, but
Cool.
And retired for 2 or 3 years, and then one day Pat Campbell, who was running the Carrier Dome, he was the managing director then, called and said, "Hey, would you think about coming back?" Because this was right after we got out of the NCAAs, and I said, "Yeah, okay, all right." So I came back for 93, 4, and then 95 was my last spring of 95.
Wow.
I was then in Binghamton working at the radio stations, where Sonny lives, and had great time down there, great town. Moved back up here in 97, and in spring of 98, they asked me to come back for, I think, the Georgetown game. And I came back for that game, which was phenomenal. And then, in 2010, that winter, I got contacted by somebody at the university, and they wanted me to come back for the Villanova game, which was billed as the largest ever crowd, 34,000, whatever it is. And I was like, well, I'm 52 years old. What do you want me to come back? It's like an asking Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, hey, you both get to play in the final game. You get to play the first half. No one's going to take you out. And so I, it was all secret. Pete Sala, a couple people at the university knew about it. In fact, the cool stories. I show up that day with my family. My kids had never seen me do the Dome Ranger because I never, they'd never seen it. And so I had 2 tickets for my kids and 2 tickets for a friend of mine that brought her son. And we went in through, stadium control there, Sonny, where the tunnel is, the wind is. And
Yep.
we literally get there at the same time that Jim and Julie Bayheimer are getting there. And I got my bag and another bag in my hands. And he'd seen me like this before, 10, 15, 20 years ago, with a bag, Rangers coming to the game. And he looks at me like, hi, Coach, how are you? And go in and I sneak around back and I go into the back tunnel there, which I got some stories about Raleigh, in that back tunnel too for you. But, and I dressed and I'm warming up back there. Bud Poliquin comes back just before the game for a walk. And I said, you can't tell anybody I'm out here. And then they put me in the tunnel in front of the SU locker room. And Mike Veely, made the announcement, ladies and gentlemen, look at the screen at the other end of the dome. And, for 10 years, here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the return of the Dome Ranger. And I came running out down the tunnel. I'm 52. I mean, I've stretched. You
got to watch out you don't pull a hammy at that point.
Right?
Right?
Let me tell you, here's the thing. This is exactly right. So, Sonny, you know how when the players used to run out,
Yep.
the managers would put the remaining chairs down in front of the tunnel because it would extend the bench?
Yeah.
So the tunnel didn't go to the floor anymore, right? So I'm running down the aisle, and the manager is putting down these chairs, and he's blocking my grand entrance in front of 35,000 people in the Carrier Dome. And I'm running and running and running. I go, no, crap. I'm going over it. So I literally run along, and I take my left leg over and land it right center in the chair, and I drag my right leg over because that's the weak knee and everything like that. And I hear a pop, and I run out in the court, and I pop my wasn't my hamstring, but what's the hell's the other one? The groin muscle. It was fine, it was fine. But and I wrote, if the place is as loud as it's ever been, and for a fan like me, a guy who was never sanctioned by the university, to have that moment, my kids are up in 305, was a pretty cool day. And we won the ball game, which was even better, But I got a story about Roley. So Roley,
let's get to that in a second. Hold on to that one, Dennis, because we're gonna get to that for sure. Glenn,
yes,
tell us about your start as the St. John's Redmen.
Well, it's kind of interesting in that I had tried out for the football team, and I had hurt my knee the previous spring, so I didn't make it. But my brother was a senior, and he was on the football team. So he's like, "Listen," he goes, "You know what?" He goes, "Get in shape." He goes, and they have a position in the cheerleading. He goes, "You want to be I go, cheerleader? I don't want to be a cheerleader." And he goes, "No, you'll be the mascot for the basketball team, and you'll travel with them everywhere." I'm like, "Really? All right, I'll give that a shot." And I was a personable guy. I wasn't shy or anything like that. So I tried out, and they were like, "You're hired." And I was like, "Okay." So, my first game, I went out there and had to have a couple of shots of courage to get out there, but did that. And then, did my woo and ran around the court, headdress, the whole get up. And they loved it. And, and then I started sliding in front of the cameras, and, I got, the more comfortable you get, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And then, Coach Conasecker met me, and he's like, he goes, "Do your thing." He goes, "But keep it clean." He goes, "It's a Catholic university. So, don't, and, because I would, when they were doing the foul shots, the opposing squad was doing the foul shots, I would give them the whammy, the Indian whammy. And, but, it wasn't really frowned upon yet, And then, of course, everybody was doing, like doing the thing behind the basket after that.
That was a Dancing Harry thing with the Knicks, right, Glenn? I mean, that was Dancing Harry giving the whammy. I remember
the
that.
Whammy. Yeah. So that's I didn't get it from there, but I would do it, and the players loved it, and that was one of the coolest parts of it. I was 17 years old, I was baby, and I was having a good time. And yet I was traveling with the team. I was dressing with the team, and I was in the locker. I was basically in the locker room with the guys, with Billy Goodwin, with Wayne McCoy, with Curtis Redding, Bobby Kelly, all these guys. The original guys from the first team. David Russell, who I know Chuck, well. Yep. And these guys were six. They were like monsters, and I was 6 foot tall, but these guys were like, wow. and they all called me chief. They all welcomed me in, and I became like part of the team. And
so unlike Dennis, Glenn, you were actually on the cheerleading squad at that point, right?
Yeah.
So when you guys actually the cheerleaders when we played, yeah, they went to games and stuff, but they didn't travel with us. I mean, did you guys ride the same planes and buses?
Yeah, I was on every bus. I was on every bus. They gave me meal money. They gave me travel money.
There you go.
Know, I mean, yeah, $30, whatever it was per game. And I would be there with them the whole time. And the guys really took a liking to me, and me and my good friend George, who became my partner later on in life. We worked at Carvel together. That was our job. And the guys would come in. I go, listen, guys, we work at Carvel. Anytime you want ice cream, these guys would drive from Jamaica, Queens to Whitestone, Queens to get ice cream.
to get a free ice cream?
That's a great.
And I told my boss, I go, look, these guys are going to be pros. We got to give them free ice cream. And I give them whatever they wanted,
It's cash as a college kid, so free ice cream is a big, that's a big get for a college guy.
Yeah.
David Russell ate like a half a gallon of vanilla ice cream with strawberries, everything on top of it. And he had it in his hand, and it looked like a cup. That's how big his hands were, and I love David. I thought David, he had the coolest name, Skywalker Russell, and he was just, I thought he was like the coolest, and it was just a great time. It was a great memory. And that was when the Big East, Dennis, as you know, that was when it was in that infancy, this is before it really blew up. And, the first 2 years I was there, then Walter came, Chris came, Bill came, and that's when they kicked it into St. John's, kicked it to another level where
those were phenomenal teams for us to go against. What a, I mean, those games in the Garden, can I ask a question? I mean, Glenn, so like when you're, what was like for you the working the fans to get them going? What was the thing that you used to do that was, the one thing you go, you could do,
Well, at Alumni Hall was obviously a lot smaller than a Carrier Dome or, the Garden. But at Alumni Hall, it was so closed in. It was like a field house, It was kind of like Villanova.
I did a game there. I know.
And you were closed in. So I would yell at the fans. I'd be like, let's go, let's get it going. You want the boys to win? And, and then I do the woo-woo thing and run around and throw my tomahawk around and it would excite them. And sure enough, they get into it. And once they got, I fed off of them, as you know. Once the crowd starts feeding off of you, you feed off of them. Kind of like being in the game, It's kind of like being in the game.
Yeah,
and it was so much. And then the players are like, "Way to go, Chief!" Rooting us on, And they would pat me on the back, and they inspire me and get me going, and it was good.
Glenn, it's a good thing that you didn't tell anybody in Syracuse about the Carvel connection, because let me tell you,
those guys would have driven down there.
We'd have come from Syracuse, but definitely when we were staying in Astoria, we would have made our trip.
You would have came down.
Are you kidding me?
and a funny story about it. So it's Chris's freshman year, and me and him were in the same class, and we all knew each other. And he goes, "Look, man, I need help with my paper." I'm like, "Sure, come to my house." So my parents were gigantic, like fans. This was their thing. This was their thing to do. This was their place to be. So Chris shows up at my house. I don't tell my mom. It's like 8:30 at night. She's in a house coat in Queens. She's getting ready for bed. And Chris rings the bell. The dog's barking, and this 6'6" guy walks in, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's Chris Mullen." my mother, like, Lord, she goes, "Are you out of your mind not telling me that he's coming here?" And she was like embarrassed at the same time, like in awe. He goes, "Oh, hi, Mrs. Beccarelli, how are you?" And he sat down. He talked to my parents. My parents are like, in amazement. Then we went down to the basement. We did our paper, and he went home. But those are the kind of things that like I cherish. I would have never been able to do that.
Yeah, I wasn't a student, so I didn't. I was actually 5 years older. I was 23 when I started, so I was basically 1 year older than a senior would be, but 5 years older. And I was just a guy who showed up, You know, I mean, like, hi, I'm here.
Right. Yeah,
so,
and
your
that,
experience,
that's neat.
I would have loved to
that you were able to do it.
Yeah,
But you know, being such a kid, it did have its because I was like, now, okay, I got my freedom. I'm in college, and you're a freshman, and you're feeling your way around. So Doc Gimler, who was the athletic director at St. John's at the time, he called me in his office. I'm like, oh, Doc Gimler's calling me in his office. He must want to tell me how good I'm doing. So he goes, Glenn, come down, sit down, talk to me for a minute. He goes, Glenn, you know where the library is? I'm like, yeah, Doc, it's right up the hill. He goes, Glenn, I know you know where it is. You have to go there. That's the point of college. I know you're having a good time, but this isn't going to last for you, man. You got to go to the library.
You spoke about your parents. Talk to us about the perks that you got as far as tickets and things like that to games.
Yeah, well, that again, like I said, my parents were they were big, gigantic fans, and so one of the cool things was St. John's would give you a pair of tickets to every game, including the games at the Garden. So the Big East tournament, the whole, if you were on the squad, you got the ticket. So I would give them to my parents. My mom wanted to come see me, thinking I was playing.
Of course,
and my dad would go. That was their date night, and so for the 4 years I was there, they got tickets, and then after. They offered me, look, you got season tickets, for your parents. You go, this is for your parents. Yeah. And they gave my parents season tickets they went another 20 years, 15 years, 20 years.
That's awesome.
And they went religiously. That was their thing to do,
Well, I thought that was some
I thought that was ice cream.
No, that oodles and noodles.
I was a little excited for a second.
Kraft macaroni.
You never know over here.
Staple.
So Dennis, I got to ask you a question.
Yeah.
At the time, we didn't have a mascot.
Right.
And I remember, there was some competition on who the mascot was going to be. There was the Beast of the East guy that came.
The monster thing that walked around.
Yeah, and then there was Dome Eddie with the crazy hair. And
I bought Dome Eddie's ticket for football for about 5 years.
So, talk about that
Wasn't
time.
There a Trojan too, or a Spartan or something?
Yeah. There was a Spartan, the Roman warrior, which didn't make sense. And
that was probably that picture.
I have a picture.
I basically looked at it like this, Sonny. I didn't really. I consider myself a mascot, but more of a super fan because I didn't have a headdress on. I wasn't a thing. I don't mean it negative, but I was a human being. That's what I thought when we came up with the Ranger was somebody who could be a human being who could look in somebody's eyes and say, "Get your ass up off the seat,"
Right.
And
but you weren't sanctioned by the school, which is interesting.
No, so I stayed off the court. When basketball came around, they knew me. They knew I wasn't going on the floor. So I just sort of went down and went by the little blue ropes on the north end and the south end. And then after we did the claps, I followed the thing down. So I didn't actually feel the competition from them. I guess they could see, because if anybody who shows up in whatever you're wearing at your school, if it's Villanova or St. John's or Syracuse, who cares? Let's go, man. Let's make as much noise and be. But I was somehow granted this unspoken access.
Right. You had that space between the crowd and the court.
That was my space,
Yeah,
and cheerleaders were down at the other end, and I was up here. And we didn't really mingle all that much because I wasn't. I'm not. Well, we did mingle a little bit, but I did my thing, my thing was like Glenn was talking about, my thing was to try and it's almost like a science. And I'd love to coach people on it because there's a moment between what's going on in the field and then what's going on in the stands. It's like you go to a great play, okay? And at the end of the play, you want to stand up first. You want to stand up, standing ovation, but no one wants to be the first one. Okay. So if I could get one butt out of a seat, it becomes 2 becomes 4, 8, 16, 32. So I would try and read the games, and there was no TV during the games. They ran commercials. or ribbon boards then. It was just quiet. I mean, the band would play for, remember people, they play for 45 seconds and then the cheerleaders would have a cheer, and I would always want us to come out of the timeout with the dome rocking. So I would start the cheer at if it was a 3-minute time, I would start the cheer at some point where I knew, let's go. The other thing is, even in the Carrier Dome, there's a great story I can tell you about officiating when we get to it later, but the Carrier Dome, there's a moment in a game between when they blow the buzzer for the team to come back out, where the fans are talking, they're drinking their beers, where the whole stadium will quiet down for like 3 seconds, and you can be heard in the Carrier Dome. And so that's when I'd go, let's go Orange. And again, to get somebody's butt off the seat, the Eddie and those other people didn't have the access,
Yeah. No, they didn't. They were just figurative people,
Oh, they were great. They're great. Eddie still shows up, I think, in his outfit.
So Glenn,
I have to buy 2 seats for football for me to sit it because of my fat butt now, but it's okay.
Dennis, did you interact at all with the players like Glenn?
Yeah, the football team, there's a couple guys that I used to drink beers with that, were seniors. John Dominic and those guys, I got to know them. And, basketball was different because basketball, Sonny, is you're in your own little pod. As much as you're on campus, it's the 25 people around you. And, but I knew the players. I'd stand out in front of the locker room, as they went out to the announcements, high five the kids, let's go, good hoop, good hustle used to be my mantra to people heading out. But I never really hung out with the basketball guys. I went with the fans. I went downtown to get 4 or 5 free Black Russians in my dome suit, and then go home and shower and come back down and party more.
Hey Glenn, what were some of your interactions with? Did you interact? Because I know you interacted with the team. How about the opposing coaches or teams?
Well, the opposing mascots are what, not so much the opposing players or coaches, but the opposing mascots. We would do a pregame ritual, and I would go up to them, hey, listen, you want to fool around? You want to get on camera, be on TV? I go, I'll do this, I'll let you do that to me, and the Villanova Wildcat bite my leg, and I tomahawk them, and it was all good natured. It was all good natured stuff, but it was fun. It was a good time. And, we interacted. But one of my favorite stories about the players is we had a player my second year was Walter Berry. So
Walter Berry.
Now Walter was, he was made fun of a lot about he couldn't read all that. But you know what? He was the nicest guy you'll ever meet in your life. He was a nice guy. He was just a little out there, but he was a nice guy. Uh-huh. So, we would talk and we became friends. And he goes, Chief, you tell me what you want me to do in a game today, and I'm going to do it. Okay. I go, I want you to do a 360 from the foul line. He goes, that's it? That's all you got? I go, that's all I got. So I'm behind I'm under the basket where I usually was, and he steals the ball at half court, and here he comes. And I swear he winked at me and took off from the foul line. It's 360 windmilled it, and bam. And he gave me 2 high fives. That was for you, buddy. That was
that's perfect.
It was cool.
That's like Babe Ruth hitting a home run for the kid in the hospital, right?
Right. It was like, and meanwhile, I'm like, oh my God.
Chuck, he never asked us to throw one down for him, right?
No. Listen, I couldn't even throw one down when I was working with him at the club. Unless it was a donut, I could dunk that. That's about it. Oreo.
I didn't get one in warm-ups.
And even with Chuck, like I said to you guys before, when I met Chuck at the club, and obviously being from St. John's, Patrick Ewing was my arch enemy. Even though he got drafted, but I just couldn't with Patrick Ewing. Right? So, because he beat us all the time. So when Chuck came, I shook his hand, and I was like, Chuck, thank you so much for being Patrick Ewing. I go, can I try? And he had his championship ring on, remember?
Yep.
And I put it on my ring finger and my pinky finger. Chuck, you got one big finger, man. But I had Chuck's Villanova championship ring on, and it meant a lot because he beat Patrick Ewing, and that's awesome. Come on, Chuck.
So cool,
that's got to be your claim to fame. Really.
One of, yeah.
So
man.
cool.
That was
awesome. Dennis, you got to tell us about Rolly then. Tell us your interaction with Rolly.
So I smoke cigarettes, you know, at that time in my life. And so at halftime, yeah, bad. I know, Doc. But I'd go in the back tunnel and I'd light up a cigarette back there. And Rolly and the coaches would be in the back hallway planning, as would, you know, a lot of the coaches, because they'd want to go outside the locker room where they were to talk about strategy while the kids cool down and do whatever they do. And so I'd be out there and, you know, I'd wave at Rolly and he'd wave at me, you know, and I go, I think you need to do this with the zone, you know, and he'd laugh because he's such a good people. I mean, all those coaches, I mean, you think of Louis, you know, when we talk about John Thompson, the big mean John Thompson, who in the Madison Square Garden wore, you know, found a sweater like Raleigh or like Coach Carnesecca's and put it on and walked up and said like this. I mean, that guy, you know, a big lovable bear, you know, I mean, but all of those coaches to, you know, I had, you know, not that I had relationships, but, you know, there was a cool knowledge of the Dome Ranger.
Yeah, but you know what? It just said, but all eight of those coaches, they were all legendary. They're
all legendary. I mean, you think of the '80s with
yeah.
You know,
Look at
basketball hadn't been, you know, ESPN. You know, these things didn't happen. You know, ESPN was in a trailer in Connecticut, and they picked up the Big East with Dave Gavitt because Gavitt was around the corner. You know, in comes, you know, Barry and Mullen and Pearl and Ewing and, you know, all these other great, you know, Pannone and all the great kids.
Pinkney.
I mean, you know, all these great players and the iconic games and the coaches and how they just, you know, the Big East going to, you know, New York City every year. I mean, you know, to go to the mecca of basketball, college basketball, and do the Big East in New York and go to, you know, our little bar across the street there that's no longer there. You mentioned your parents, you know, my mom and dad would go to the Big East every year. And they were there one year and some guy from somewhere else on another team was in front of my mother or behind my mother and he's yelling and he yells about me on the floor or something like that. And he was yelling about Syracuse. My mother turned around and said, "You turn around and sit down and shut up. That's my son." And my mother isn't, you know, she wasn't 110 pounds in a wool coat after a rainstorm or, you know, 5'4". I mean, but yeah, the memories, the moments, you know, I mean, I'm not complaining. I got turf toe, my right foot, you know, I got a bad knee. But
these are all injuries you got while performing as the Dome Ranger.
Well, you got to remember the original tartan floor was basically about this much rubber.
Yep.
Over.
Played on it.
Cement.
And the basketball court, you know, of Sonny's day, Red Bruin's knees and Leo's knees were blown out because literally the court was that tartan surface like this, had no give, no, you know, you didn't slide. And first 3 years I wore cowboy boots. And I ran around concrete and upstairs and, you know, I ran for football games about 8 miles a game. Now, any other time in my life, you ask me to go run 8 miles, I go, yeah, okay. You know, I mean, for basketball, you know, I was a lineman when I played football in high school. I had a great 40-yard dash. And what's a basketball court? It's basically 40 yards. So I would often beat the fast breakdown, you know, in front of the home crowd on that one side. And, you know, I'd be going like this. And so, you know, I had the best gig of all of the people who were like, you know, super fans or mascots or cheerleaders in the country because I had the biggest arena. I had space and no one bothered me. You know, I mean, literally, like, you know, the one good story was when I came back for the Georgetown game. I think it was Georgetown in '98. There's that one quiet moment in the dome, you know, like I talked about between timeouts. And Jim Burr's got the ball down by the visitors bench. And that's where I usually hung out in that north side. And I used to, if Boeheim did this, I'd do this. You couldn't hear me when the crowd was yelling, but I'd be yelling, "You dumb mother, make this bullshit good call." So Burr hears me and he looks at me and he looks back and he looks at me and he takes the ball and he goes like this with the ball right here. He goes, I go, technical? Me? I go, just kidding. You know, I mean, because what I never want to do is interfere with the game. You know what I mean? No fan should ever interfere with the game. The game is to be played in the arena. And that's why I never went, on the court. After the games, obviously, I did. Or, Pearl makes the shot, or, Leo makes the shot to win the Big East there that first year. Another cool officiating story. I wasn't the Dome Ranger, but I got some good seats. Actually, I took Dave Green. Dave Green will vouch for this, Sonny, your pal in Binghamton. It was the regionals in 2014 or 15, Michigan and Duke maybe, or North Carolina. Pat Driscoll had the game, and there was a short African-American official there. And we were sitting behind a couple from Michigan, I think it was. And she was they were Mutt and Jeff. She was about 4'8". And I'd yell some stuff, but I'm not a fan, so I just yell. And she goes, "Man, I wish you," she was yelling, "I wish I had your voice." I said, "Well, you want me to yell for you at some point, let me know." So, there's a foul was called on their team, and she says, he's too short to make that call. Typical official thing. He's the shorter guy. He's too short to make that call. Will you yell that? And I go, sure. So it's the timeout, and it's the that 2-second quiet time when the buzzer goes off. The official walks by the bench. He's ready to point, going ready like this, and the dome is quiet. And I yell, "He's too short to make that call." And Pat Driscoll was one of my good friends, and I worked with, obviously, when we were in the city with Pat Driscoll, looks at me like, he knows my voice. He looks at me and I go, so, these officials, I mean, you got to ride the officials.
Yeah. Got to ask you, Glenn, in your experience, is there one game that really sticks out, or one moment that,
Oh yeah, that would be Georgetown St. John's at the Garden. Kevin Williams and me were friends. Now Kevin was the sixth man off the bench for St. John's, and I was really good friends with him. And he was from Harlem, I was from Queens, so I drive him. If I had my parents' car, I drive him home, and he used to tell me, "Chief, whatever you do, don't stop for red lights. Just get the hell out of this neighborhood." So they're playing St. John's, and St. John's playing Georgetown, and Kevin came up to me before the game. He goes, I'm taking Patrick out of the game today." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I'm taking him out of the game." He goes, "All right." I'm like, "All right, no, I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but I don't know if he's going to defend him or what he has planned." So the game's going on, and Patrick was a rough guy, man. He was rough under the basket, as I'm sure you know, Chuck.
Yep. So
Kevin took it upon himself to start a fight with Patrick Ewing. And sure enough, they both got thrown out.
No kidding.
And I was like, oh my God. And that same game, the Georgetown Hoya, right? He left his head on the sidelines. So my George, who was my partner, who Chuck knows, my partner George, and he was at the game. So I took the head and I put it under his seat at the Garden. And he goes, "I don't want to get thrown out of school, man. You're going to get me thrown out of college." I go, "Don't worry about it. We'll be all right. Don't worry." And the guy was begging me. The Hoya was begging me, "Please, Chief, give me my head back. I'll do anything you ask." I go, "You're not allowed to root for the rest of the game. I'll give you your head if you don't root for the rest of the game." So I obviously gave it back to him, and the guy was relieved. But yeah, when Kevin took Patrick out, in the second half of that game, and we won. And and I was and Kevin went on to play for the Seattle Supersonics. He played, I think, 2 years for Seattle, and he was, he should have started, in my opinion, but we were friends, so I had I was kind of like on his side. Sure. Bobby Kelly was the point guard, and
that's cool.
But Kevin was a good guy. And Patrick and Willie Glass. I have a story about Willie Glass real fast. Willie Glass. We were at practice, and I used to throw the balls to the guys. I used to go to practice with them, and I'd be passing the ball to the guys, warm ups and stuff like that.
Sure, rebounding.
And Willie Glass could jump out. He could jump out of the gym, like he could leap.
At springs, yeah.
Yeah, he had some springs. So he goes, "What do you want?" what do you want me to do? I go, I heard you could grab quarters off the top of the backboard. I don't believe that. I think that's a bunch of crap. And he goes, really? So they got a ladder. They put quarters on top of the backboard, and he came and he swiped them right off the top of the backboard. It was insane.
That's cool. I have three moments of memory, great memory, a lot of memories, but great moments with players. Obviously, is when Dwayne made that shot against Georgetown from half court. I was behind him in the north end zone, and saw him go up and saw always a great trivia question: who got the rebound? Sonny, you know who got the rebound?
Yeah, I know who got the rebound. Sean Cairns.
Your buddy from down there, Sonny. Or Sean Cairns passes it out Pearl, and you can see Pearl. I mean, literally, I saw him run to the locker room. We all go crazy. Pearl and Ewing in the Garden, when Ewing almost hit him. Actually, I was on the end line where that took place, and I ducked when Ewing took the swing at Pearl, and he missed Pearl.
Oh yeah.
I saw Pearl really up until a few weeks before he was, in New York in the hospitals, because he worked at the University of the Dome, and we became friends and talked a lot. But I told him, I said, he touched your aura, Pearl. He goes, no, man. He goes, I could feel his hand go by, And then the other great moment, of course, is when in the North Carolina game, we lost the game, but when Sonny Spera took that shot from the corner, drilled it at halftime, and ran off the court. He ran off the court like Pearl that day too, man.
Shameless plug right there.
Listen, guys, we could go on all day, but unfortunately we're out of time right now. But I got to tell you, I really enjoyed all the stories. What a unique perspective of two guys that were on the floor during some of the biggest games in Big East history, really, if you think about it, right? Yeah. Dennis Brogan, the Dome Ranger, thank you. Glenn Baccarelli,
Glenn, nice to meet you, man.
My pleasure to meet you, man.
Yeah, be good.
We really enjoyed it. I'm so glad you guys were able to come on.
Thanks for making the experience great.
Thank you. Always, brother.
Listen, it made my college life. It really did. It made college really cool for me.
I still have eligibility.
This has been Chuck Everson and Sonny
Redmond, baby.
I got my towel ready to go.
This has been Chuck Everson and Sonny Spera. You've been listening to the Big East Rewind, and the Big East Rewind is available on where you get your podcasts. It's also available on YouTube. The Big East Rewind has been produced by Daryl Gurney and Nick Corvus. You can reach out for us. We'd love to hear comments. We'd love to hear suggestions. If you have any, please reach out to us either on Messenger, on Facebook. You can message Sonny or myself, or you can email us at bigeastrewind@gmail.com. And when you go on YouTube, if you like what you see, please hit subscribe, and we'll be getting out more content from other folks that went through the Big East at the time that Sonny and I did, and thereafter a little bit, as we talk about the old school Big East. So once again, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate your time for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
Great day.
Peace out.
Thanks,
guys.
I'll talk to you soon. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you. See ya.